Hi guys, and welcome back to Pass and Move. And for today's episode, we do have the Atletico Madrid tactics and team guide, or player guide as well. What we'll basically be doing is just going through every possible tab here out on the left, mainly focusing, of course, on the tactics and the players. And in general, what we'll be covering is obviously trying to set up the team in the best way possible, but at the same time, maybe players that you should try and sell, or play areas that need investment in your squad, and just general advice on how to manage your squad as well. So one of the first things I like to do is actually go into my staff. Obviously I sort out my staff entirely, but I just want to try and find out who in my staff I can trust in terms of their judgment of ability, so I know which players I should be leaning on and which players I shouldn't. So apparently our head of youth development is the best in terms of judgment of current ability, and that suits me quite well. Obviously, preference is to always rely on your assistant manager, who should have high ratings of judgment, ability and potential. And to be fair to German here, he does have quite high attributes for both those categories, but we're still going to go with Miguel here, who has a bit better than him, so it just makes a bit sense. And I think Miguel would have been at the club for quite some time as well, so both of their judgments can be trusted, and if you wanted to, you could really actually alternate between the two, and just to make sure that their judgments are correct. Another thing I like to do is actually go on team report. It's one of the best things to do. Have a look at your overall strengths and your weaknesses, and obviously try and build towards your strengths, and try and cover up your weaknesses, so to say. But yeah, I go on to squad depth. I just set everything on current ability. I try and show the formation. I don't pick a formation, I just go on all positions, and I go on player's best role, and then I show my opinion of the best trusted staff member that I've chosen, which is Miguel, of course. That way now you can actually see Atletico Madrid have which players play and which positions, and how to bring out the best out of your squad. So just having a quick look here, you can tell that Atletico Madrid have a bunch of strikers, but the truth is only two of them are good enough, which is Costa and Griezmann. Griezmann is also very comfortable playing out on the left. You've got Carrasco though, who also wants to play there, and Vitolo, who's on loan, so we can ignore him basically. Carrasco is also capable of playing on the right, but unfortunately that means his star rating does drop a bit. But if we were to play Griezmann on the right as well, it would drop a huge amount in comparison. Griezmann also capable in the attacking midfield department, but of course his star abilities does drop a hint as well, so it's just something to keep in mind. And of course Correa's here as well. Got the likes of Torres, Guerrero and Vieto as well as strikers, so it's a huge chunk of strikers in truth. And we also got left wingers and right wingers, players who are capable of dropping down if need be, but of course their star ability also drops. That's something just to keep in mind. Koke, who's a left midfielder, is actually also very capable in central midfield, which is arguably where we're going to need him. We've got Sol there, who's performing, who's got a really good rating there too. Gabi in defensive midfield, the ratings remain relatively similar to the central of midfield, but it seems like central midfield is just a bit of a better area. We've also got Felipe Luis and Juan Fran, who are both comfortable playing as wing backs or full backs. Then we've got the likes of Godin, Savic and Jose Jimenez, who are very comfortable playing in central defense. In the goal, of course, we've got Jan Oblak as well as Moya here. But yeah, I mean, just having an overall view of the squad, you can tell that there's a number of formations that you could really use. You could go with a 4-3-3 if you wanted to, but of course that means playing Correa in a position that he might not be comfortable in, because it doesn't really seem to show him capable of playing anywhere else other than left wing. Also, we've got the issue to deal with if you're playing a one striker formation, that you've got far too many strikers in Torres, Guerrero, Vieto and Costa. And that's of course if you plan playing Griezmann there, that's another issue as well. You can also consider playing a two striker formation with Griezmann and Costa both leading the line for your team, which can be very dangerous. to opposition teams, of course. And it's clear to see that your central midfielders are better than your defensive midfield, so that's another area to consider. But if you did play a Koke, Sol and Gabi, for example, in defensive midfield, then you've got a three-man midfield that's very capable of protecting your team at the same time. Also got three centre defenders who are very capable starters for your team, so it is something to consider. Godin, Savic and Jimenez. That means that gives you the option of playing a three-man backline if you wanted to. And I'll show you just a second when we go into our tactics, but it's just that you've got many different directions that you can take this Atletico Madrid team in. But having considered everything, I've decided that a 4-2-3-1, the boring 4-2-3-1 that every top team seems to play with, is actually the best thing to do. So out of Godin, Jimenez is possibly the one that you want to partner him with. We'll just play with a standard back four. Godin and Jimenez, if you have them both, they're both Uruguayan. They'll both have a good partnership, I would expect. And at the same time, Jimenez here has plenty of potential to be a first teamer, more so than Savic. Also 4-2-3-1, two central midfielders, not two DMs. Even though Gabi and Thomas Partey are clearly more comfortable in defensive midfield, they're just as equally good in central midfield. And at the same time, Koke and Sol, who are our best options in the middle of the park, they're more comfortable in central midfield as well, more so than defensive midfield. At the same time, playing a 4-2-3-1 allows Griezmann, Correa and Carrasco to all play. And although Carrasco is going to suffer a little bit by playing out on the right, he should be able to still do a very decent job there. It also allows us to give the freedom of playing Costa, who's clearly head and shoulders above the other strikers at the club. So despite us having very capable so-called backup strikers, Costa is the best out of them all, and it would make sense to try and bring out the best out of him. Also playing a two-man striker partnership with let me show you actually the formation. Actually, no, I'll show the tactics later on, since we're going to discuss that in depth. That's a different issue. But basically, if you did play a two-man striker partner, you do have the numbers for it, but the problem means that you won't be able to play with wingers, and that's a huge issue, of course, because you've got the likes of Carrasco, Gaetan, obviously there's Correa as well. You won't really be playing with an attacking midfielder either. What I was thinking was a three-man back line, so three centre-backs, a wing-back, a DM, two central midfielders, and then two strikers. Now, of course, that would mean the lack of wingers and attacking midfielder, which is again a lot of the players play in that position, and you'd essentially have players who are at your club who are very capable of being first team players for your club, but unfortunately there's no actual position for them. So it's something that I had to consider, even though I'm leaning to that formation a bit more, because it means Griezmann and Costa are leading the line for you, which is as good a duo as ever. But unfortunately it means giving up the rest of your squad, who are of course going to be very upset to leave, and at the same time are top players, and they have potential to be even better. Something like Carrasco will have nowhere to play in that formation should you have used it. But now that we know that our formation is a 4-2-3-1, we can actually go and look at our squad. We'll have a look at some other quick tabs just in general. You have to keep in mind, even though the financial status says that you're rich, you're actually not that rich. You have 8 million in the bank. It's expected to go up, I would assume. You don't have actually you do have a ton of debt actually, which is even weirder that your club thinks they're rich. You got 2 million per month, so even with the 8 million that you have currently, that's gone in about 3 months, even if you haven't paid any wages to everyone. So it's a bit of a concern how your finances are going. I'd argue that you're in a worse position off than when Diego Simón actually started with Atletico Madrid. Look at your balance, it's just horrible. Your transfer budget's really bad as well. Profits and losses it's just everything's gone down the drain. You have to keep in mind that you have a transfer budget of 175k, and the truth is that you're actually under your wage budget as well, or over your wage budget, so you're in the red. Obviously just adjusting this a little bit will help. I actually have a tendency to set it in the middle and have it leaning towards transfer budget, but again that money's gone into wages, so if you do that once more, it's not going to go into wages again. No. So you actually just have 63k to spend, which is a huge issue. So it looks like in terms of Atletico Madrid, you're really going to have to rely on creating your own players. If we have a quick look at the under-19s, you can see there's no one really ready for the first team, but you do have a couple of potential players who can slot into your side. Ruben, Oscar and Rodrigo, if they all fulfill their potential, they can be first teamers. as well as Gustavo here too. Atletico Madrid B, there's no real options, I think. Couple of players who are very close to first team action but still not hit their La Liga side. You've got Nicholas, who's a striker, so he is someone to keep an eye on, and you've got goalkeeper Axel Werner as well, but again, they're close but not close enough. What else can we cover here? The club, of course, is on a transfer ban until September, or after basically the summer transfer window shuts, and that means you basically won't be able to do any transfers until the January transfer window, which again, you probably don't even have money for in the first place. In terms of ins or outs, you don't really have any, so that's okay for you. Your scouting should always be set on world packages for both youth and senior. You're supposed to be one of the best clubs in the world, so you have to be able to cover all of them as much as possible, and I'd recommend picking those options basically. I don't think the board have any issues with the restrictions in place for scouting, so that's fine. Competition expectations leave you at qualification for European Champions League basically, and I think you're very capable of making that. If we have a look at quickly at the season preview, you're actually expected to end in third, which is a very fair assessment with the quality of players you've got. But it's just a matter of your depth, which I think it showed in the weaknesses of your team report. You don't have too much depth, and you also don't have money to spend at all. So you're in this world of Barcelona, Madrid exceeding expectations, or, well, in truth, fairness to them, meeting expectations of being world-class teams. And you're there with basically a shoestring budget of a team who's probably a relegation candidate, or even worse, you probably got the budget of a team who's in the lower leagues. So it's a huge task, but it's a very interesting one, a very challenging one. Champions League, you're expected to reach the quarterfinal, which you should be able to do. And the Spanish Cup's not important to the board, so you'll be alright in that regard. Schedule, I always like to set up my own friendlies. You've got a fair decent ones here with some Portuguese teams, but again, I always like to set up my own 3 at home and 3 away on tour. Training, I like to set it on high intensity and balanced during preseason, and then when the season starts, go back to average. And then match preparations, always on match tactics, unless my scout tells me otherwise in terms of the facing the opposition. Staff, like I mentioned, you want to completely revamp your staff to work in your favor. Also bear in mind that your wage budget, because of how low it is, it actually means that you can't actually offer new contracts to anyone in your squads. That's a huge issue as well, and you might have to sacrifice 1 or 2 players in your squad, sell them off for a huge chunk of money to actually be okay as a club. That's a different issue entirely. So let's go have a look at the squad now. Finally, we've already judged that we want to play a 4-2-3-1 formation. Now we have to see whether we've got the adequate numbers for the squad. If you ask me, I like to have a squad of 22 players. You've got 28 here, which is good, but of course some of them are unknown. But yeah, the reason I like to have 22 players is a starting 11 of leading star or world-class players, and a backup 11 of youngsters with potential to become leading star or world-class players, but at the same time are ready for first division action. And what I mean by ready for first division action is that their current ability actually reads ready for a decent player for most first division sides, or even good player for most first division sides, and have potential to be leading. But yeah, I feel like that gives you the best balance. No one really complains about game time if you have it like that. And at the same time, it just gives a nice little competitive edge between your own players. So now that we know our formation, we're going to have to look at each individual department and see whether we need to invest in certain places, even though you don't have the money or the transfer ban for it. But it's just for future reference and maybe areas that you just want to keep an eye out on. So in goal, you've got Jan Oblak, who of course is one of the top goalkeepers in the world. He can still improve a little bit as well, and I think he should become a star goalkeeper for the division. He's very much so your first choice option. And his backup here is a capable backup in Miguel, a good player for most first division sides. But of course, if you ask me, you can do the little bit of improvement there and actually invest in a youngster with potential who, because Miguel's, as good as Miguel is, a very capable backup, but the problem is obviously he's old, 33 years of age, and at the same time you could do with a youngster who can eventually compete, actually seriously compete with Jan Oblak for that first team role, because Moya's only going to get worse, he's not going to get any better. So it's just something to keep an eye on, but right now at least you've got the numbers there, and that's the main problem to solve when you first join a squad. Right backs, you've got 2 of them, Juanfran and Sime here, and in truth both of them can actually be first teamers. You've got a good one in Sime here who's arguably a hint better than Juanfran, but actually He's comfortable with being a rotation option, and Juan Fran, he deserves some type of respect. He's also just a good player for most first division sides, and he's expecting first team football, and he is the player who's on higher wages. So at the moment, he just about sneaks past Sime, and also it helps us that Juan Fran is more of a full attacking fullback than Sime is, and we're an attacking team, so we're supposed to be one of the top teams in the division, so we have to be attacking, and so Sime kind of falls short of that. But of course, if you ask me, both of them aren't actually giving you good enough balance. You need an actual leading right back and then a backup youngster with potential. Both of these players are just flat out good players for most first division sides, and they don't have potential, either one of them. So it's just something to keep an eye on. But also, I always like to mention in my series, do not ever sell your players off and then buy. Always invest first and then sell your player that you've got extra. So you don't want to sell Juan Fran, for example, say he's not good enough, I'm going to sell him, and then you go and you try and find the right back who's leading, and unfortunately, well, in the case of Atletico Madrid, you can't even buy one right now. But at the same time, let's say you didn't have a transfer ban, then the player that you might have an eye on doesn't actually end up moving to you. Maybe the money that you got from Juan Fran, the club keeps and doesn't actually give it to you for board investment or anything like that. They don't give it to you in the budget or anything. So you have to be very careful. You always have to invest first and then sell off your extra players. But in general, I always say for fullbacks, it's very tough to actually find leading fullbacks in the game, and when you do actually find leading ones, so let's say for example Alaba's a top left back without doubt, but when you do try and buy him, he's going to probably cost you about 100 million, so it's a bit silly. So just keep that in mind when it comes to fullbacks. Every other position I feel like you can easily find top talent, but the fullbacks are very difficult in this year's FM. But at least you got the numbers, so that's another area that you don't have to be too concerned with yet. In terms of central defenders, it looks like you got 5 of them, but one of them's on loan in Emiliano. In terms of quality, Godin is definitely your first choice. He's the leading player for most first division side, and it's the minimum requirement you're supposed to be looking for your players, to have leading ones, because you are supposed to be top talented. You also got Jose here, who's supposed to be another first choice, good for most first division sides, but has potential to be leading. So again, you can be absolutely ruthless and try and find a top centre-back and then have Jimenez as a backup. But just bear in mind, you've also got the likes of Steven Savic, who's also supposed to be a good player for most first division sides, so you can definitely improve on him and have a youngster potential. You also can show faith to Jose and just keep him on and hope that he becomes a leading Premier League player, first division player very quickly, and in that sense, you don't need to invest in a top player. You've got the most ideal backup youngster with potential in the form of Lucas. So this is the type of player that you should be aiming for. He's young, he's got a ton of potential, he's ready for first division football, and he's ambitious, he's got the perfect personality, central defender as well. He'll slot into your team very easily, and he's the type of balance that you're supposed to be looking for. So if you ever ask me what you should be doing, what type of balance I mean, then what I mean is Godin, leading player for most first division sides, and then his backup is the youngster Jose, who knows that he's a backup player and who has tons of potential. Sorry, not Jose, Lucas, who has a ton of potential to actually overtake him. Jose is also a very perfect example of having a youngster backup with potential. The problem is Jose's been at Atletico Madrid for a while and he expects first team football, so that didn't really work in our favour. He's also a Uruguayan international, just to keep in mind. But yeah, I mean, I think if you ask me what I would do, I would actually just trust Jose, especially because I don't have any money or anything like that. So Jose and Godin would be my first choices. I'll have backups in Steven Savic and Lucas, and I'd, as soon as possible, try and bring in a backup youngster with potential to replace Savic and sell Savic off. But so far, again, you've got the numbers. Left backs, you've got Luis and Sergi here. Unfortunately, Sergi, even though he fulfills the numbers, he is definitely not good enough for your side. He's a second division B player, not even a good second division player. And, he's definitely never going to become a first teamer. So, it's you don't want him in your team at all. But the truth is, he does offer... he does fulfill the numbers in the left back spot, because at the moment you've only got Felipe Luis, who's obviously your first choice option, a leading player for most first division sides, like I mentioned. Very tough to have a top fullback, so it's good that you do have one in the shape of Felipe Luis, and hopefully he can make amends for the weakness in the right back spot. But also bear in mind, he's 31 years of age, Brazilian international, so he will start to decline soon, but use him to the full extent that you can until that happens. But yeah, so far, if you ask me where's the most crucial area to invest in is actually to bring in a capable backup to Felipe Luis, because if he ever gets injured, you don't want to be playing Sergi. He's not even ready for first division football. So we mentioned playing a 4-2-3-1 formation, which means you need 4 central midfielders. You've got 5 of them in the shape of Thomas Partey, Augusto Fernandez, Gabi, Sol, and Koke. And I think that's kind of it. I think in general, because so many positions are interchangeable, you actually want to do this and just completely highlight everyone that's left over after the defenders. So just get rid of everyone that's on loan. That leaves you with 13 players, and you've got 2 central midfielders, you've got 2 wingers, you've got an attacking midfielder and a striker. So that's 6 players, 6 positions that still need filling, and then obviously you need the backups for them. So you actually need 12 players, and you've got 13 here. So definitely one of these players are going to be sold off. The question is who. So we want to fit the best of the best together, and that is in the shape of Sol, Koke, Correa, Carrasco and Griezmann, as well as Costa, all playing in the same side. They are the best out of these options right here. Also bear in mind though that Costa isn't allowed to play for Atletico Madrid until I think January. I'm not sure. Let's have a look at his attributes. Unavailable to play club football until 31st of December, or basically 1st of January. I think 31st of December he won't be allowed to play either. So even though this tactic's built on the basis of having him in your team because he is your top striker, you have to keep in mind that he isn't your first choice until that time passes. The only reason why I built it is because I'm trying to build a tactic for the long term, and at the same time I can't build a tactic that doesn't include Costa when he is going to be one of your top talents. But anyways, so there you go. That's our 6 players in the shape of Sol, Koke, Correa, Carrasco, Griezmann and Costa, and so that leaves you with a ton of other players. In terms of central midfielders, you only need 2 more, but you've got 3 over here in Thomas Partey, who's a defensive midfielder, central midfielder. You've got Augusto Fernandez, central midfielder, right midfielder and defensive midfielder, and you've also got Gabi. Now the problem here is that you actually need a backup attacking midfielder as well. So Gaetan is a left winger, so that'll help us for him being a backup in the to Griezmann. He is listed at the moment, I think. He's a good player for most first division sides, so he's a decent backup, but you do want a youngster with potential to try and compete with Griezmann. He's listed even though you need him in terms of numbers. So I reckon keep him on your team. You've also got too many strikers when you need one attacking midfielder to be, to help out with Correa. And unfortunately, these 3 central midfielders can't actually play in attacking midfield positions. So Fernando Torres, Gamiero, as well as Vieto, all aren't comfortable in the attacking midfield. But if you ask me, Vieto can be retrained into attacking midfielder, so he's arguably the one that you should turn to, but at the same time he is the only one with potential who can become a leading first division striker, so do you really want to take that away from him? But keep in mind he does very much have the abilities of being an attacking midfielder, so it's something to just keep in mind really. At the same time, you can have a look at your staff members' recommendations. Sometimes they do say you can retrain them, and it says here that he can be retrained as an attacking midfielder. Let's have a look at Gamiero. He can also be an attacking midfielder, and Torres can also be retrained. So if you ask me, sacrifice Torres. He's your 33-year-old player. He's most likely to, at his age, his pace and all that sort of stuff is going to start to decline anyway, so you might as well retrain him in a deeper position where his pace might not be as important. So let's consider Torres as the backup to Correa. But he's also a player that you don't necessarily want as your backup. He's susceptible to injuries. He's only considered a good player, so you do want a youngster with potential instead. And if we're speaking the truth, Correa is not even ready for for being a top player for your team yet. You can show faith in him and hope he quickly becomes a leading player, but at the same time you could be absolutely ruthless and invest in a top attacking midfield talent too. If you ask me what I would do, I'll just show faith. I always have a tendency to show faith in my players, but let's assume Torres is the backup to Correa. So that leaves you Gamiero, Vieto and these players here, and you're still in need of a backup right winger. Of course, you also need a backup striker, so either one of these can be your backup strikers in truth. In terms of a right winger, it looks like Gamiero has a hint of being accustomed to that role. You also got Vieto, who again can be retrained, but once more, I do think Gamiero should be the one who sacrifices. He's a good player for most first division sides. He's not going to have the potential to actually compete with Costa in the striker position, whereas Vieto, who can become a leading player, can actually seriously compete there. These are just stopgap solutions, by the way. Of course, you do actually want to invest in players who are proper right wingers, proper attacking midfielders, all that sort of business. But at the moment, you can't actually do anything, so we're just trying to retrain players as much as possible. So let's assume Guimaraes is your right winger, a backup right winger, and Vieto is your backup striker. That leaves you with these three here. So it looks like one of your central midfielders are going to have to be the ones to go. So Gabi is a very decent, backup central midfielder. But again, he's only good for most first division sides. You do want someone who's a youngster with potential, but Gabi's getting towards the end of his career. He might understand that he needs to retire soon. Augusto is very similar, but he's also susceptible to injury, so that's a bit of an issue. And you've also got the likes of Thomas Partey, who does have a hint of potential. So if you ask me, it's going to have to be one of Fernandes or Gabi to go. But if we keep in mind that Sol and Koke are both very creative players, then it's likely that their backups have to be creative players, and so you have a decision to make on who you sacrifice, because it's very clear that Thomas Partey is not a creative player at all. Augusto Fernandes is he doesn't seem to be a very creative player either, so that means that you should probably hold on to Gabi, and it should be either one of Partey or Fernandes to go. And if you ask me, just based on potential and the likelihood of Partey becoming a leading player for most first division sides, you might want to show, have a tendency just like me to show him a bit of faith and hold on to him. And so the most disposable player so far is Augusto Fernandes. Now, he's susceptible to injuries, another reason why to sell him. You'd be getting 57k off your wages, as well as making 11.75 million. He's also wanted by a few clubs in China, so if you did sell him, you'd help your balance in your finances, and at the same time get some wages off that you can potentially give to someone else, so that way you can maybe try and hold on to your star players or anything like that. But yeah, it's a very difficult time at Atletico Madrid right now. You're going to have to do an incredible job with this team, because you've got really high expectations for a team who have talented players, but on the edge of having everything completely crumble around them. And so you want to be very, very careful on how you manage this squad. So it is, like I've shown you one by one, your issue really is depth. But once you sort that out, and actually you're going to need the money for it in truth, so it's even more crucial for you to actually hit the target of getting Champions League football once more. You do have very capable backups. There's no one who's just a decent player for most first division sides. All your backups are good players, so it's try and avoid relying on them. Try and use your starting players as much as possible. But if need be, you do have capable or decent backups. The only issue you have really is the left back spot, which I already mentioned, is Sergi. Your backup is not good enough at all, so it is an area of concern. So there you go. We now already know our players, we know everything else. The only thing left is our tactics and how we work it out. So I've gone, like I mentioned, we've talked 4-2-3-1. This is how we're going with a target man on attack. We've got advanced playmaker in Correa. We've got Carrasco on the right as an inside forward, Griezmann as an inside forward as well on attack, Sol as a roaming playmaker, Koke as a deep line playmaker, Luis and Juan Fran as fullbacks, one alternating the other, one on attack, one on support, Jimenez as a ball-playing defender, and Godin as a central defender, and Oblak as a sweeper keeper. So as you can tell from the analysis, very quickly, it's very easy to see from the formation itself that your weakness is going to be opposition attacking midfielders. So if you ask me, you should have Koke completely and always specifically man mark the attacking midfield position, the opposition attacking midfield, so that this place doesn't really get exposed. So in terms of the actual tactical style, the way we're playing a very direct type of football. It seems to suit our side more. We have the option to have overlapping partnerships and direct partnerships, and what I mean by overlapping is, Juan Fran's a fullback on attack, for example, so he's going to overlap Carrasco quite often, whereas Luis is on support to Griezmann's attack, so that means he's a direct partnership, because that means Luis would only ever support Griezmann and not actually overlap him. So even here, Correa, he's only likely to support Costa, not actually overlap him. So we've got two direct partnerships and one overlapping one. When it comes to this type of tactical style, what suits it best is to have two kinds of partnerships. Some formations only suit overlapping, some tactics only suit overlapping partnerships, some only suit direct partnerships. So bearing that in mind, that's why we've got the variation here. But in general, the tactical styles to have dribbling players, crossing players, players who cross from deep, players who shoot a lot, and that's the type of direct style of play that you want. You also do want some strength in your side, someone who's tackling harder, someone who's winning the ball back, and that type of business. But in general, mentality can be control or attacking, whichever one you want. I just say stay on control unless you need to use attacking, because control keeps you being wary of your opponent's counter-attacking threat, which is likely to happen a lot considering you're Atletico Madrid. Team shape, really, so many people have many different understandings of this category, I suppose, or this selection, this tactical selection. But I say if you're really unsure, just stick to flexible. Otherwise, I like to use fluids, and I also, I love using both in truth, structured and fluid. Both depends on my team and how I see them. Fluid just means your players are going to be working together a bit more, and they have more creative freedom or whatnot. Everyone knows that. Structured just means you keep a better team shape, but everyone will be focused individually on their own jobs. But if you ask me, you're a top team in a top division, it makes a bit more sense to play fluid. But again, if you're unsure and you don't want to risk anything, just stick to flexible. It's not an issue. Our team instructions are very simple. Play with a more direct passing as well as using an offside trap. And that's really it. I don't like to play too much with team instructions. I'm not a huge fan of it. I only like to alternate things specifically if it'll help my team if we have certain weaknesses. Like if we have slow center defenders, then I'll play a deeper defensive line, that type of thing. But for now, it's very simple here. More direct passing and offside trap. So that the reason why we're playing an offside trap is because we're on control. We're playing a very attacking formation as well. So it makes sense for us to have a sweeper keeper, and Jan Oblak is very capable in that role. Even though he loves to play as a goalkeeper more, he's very capable as a sweeper keeper, and we need him in that role anyways. Jimenez and Godin, just to play them in as natural a position and role as possible. So that's what we've done here. And of course, ball playing defender helps us with their direct passing as well. We've got Juan Fran on fullback at attack and Felipe Luis as a fullback on support. We just mentioned to do overlapping and supporting runs. This tactical style actually asks for fullbacks on support, so you do want crosses from deep, which is the tactical style that you're looking for. So having a fullback on support is perfect. Griezmann just as inside forward on attack is what he prefers best. It also helps him focus on his finishing and dribbling more than it does when he's playing as an inside forward on support, which goes to his crossing. Even though he's a very capable crosser, of course. Carrasco is a bit of an issue because he's right-footed. Inside forward on the left is actually his most natural position. It makes sense since he's cutting onto his right foot, but he does have a tendency to cut inside from both wings, so playing him on the right as an inside forward won't harm him too much, but just bear in mind he might have to use his left foot a bit more often than you might want him to. Unfortunately, the roles of advanced playmaker or winger don't bring out the best out of him. At the same time, even though a winger would suit our tactic a bit more, he still cuts inside from both wings, so you do want to untrain this as much as possible. But obviously for now he's an inside forward, so don't do that yet. Costa, he's a defensive forward. It's supposed to be his best according to my assistant manager, but if you ask me, target man on attack actually helps a little bit better. It doesn't focus on his positioning, it still gets the best out of his mentals, which are aggression, bravery, determination, and at the same time focuses on his finishing, which is a bit unlike the defensive forward role. But the truth is, with Costa you can play him in a number of different roles. Just avoid, I think, the advanced forward or poacher roles. He doesn't have too much natural fitness and pace and all that sort of business, but he can definitely be a deep line forward or a complete forward, all that sort of business. He's pretty much a very complete striker, but I think the best way to get out of him is a target man on attack, so we've gone with that. Also helps, of course, our overall direct style of play. Correa, most comfortable as an advanced playmaker, just makes sense to slot him into that side. A lot of flair, a lot of dribbling, a lot of first touch, vision, passing. You can't really ask for more from an attacking midfielder. In central midfield, you've got Koke and Saul, who make the heart of your team. You are playing three playmakers, so bear in mind you don't really have someone who's going to be win the ball back for your team and stuff. But Koke and Saul are both capable of playing either role. In truth, deep line playmaker or roaming playmaker suits both of them. But I've just gone with Koke and deep line playmaker on defend duty because I feel like his positioning is a bit better. But at the same time, because he plays short simple passes, shoots from distance, curls the ball, it seems to make a bit more sense that Saul, who's got player traits such as tries killer balls often, runs with ball often, which is very it's a huge part of being a roaming playmaker, is dribbling a lot. So I've just gone with Saul as a roaming playmaker instead. But both players very capable, and either of them very complete central midfielders as well. So I think this is the best way to get out the best from our current squad, our first team. But if you ask me, what should I eventually be working towards so I can get the best out of playing a direct style of football? If you stick to this direct style of football, you can obviously move towards something else, but this is the best way to get out of the current set of your players. But if you're eventually trying to build something towards, then you should probably go with wingers because they cross more often. Inside forwards you don't want to be playing a winger on attack because they cross from the byline. When we're looking for crosses from deep, it doesn't make any sense. So probably wingers on either side on support would suit the tactic best. You play fullbacks on attack, so that takes away the cross from deep option, but you can still edit the instruction and tell them to cross from deep, or you can just ask your wingers who are on support to cross from deep if need be. You can also, you want to avoid an advanced playmaker because they shoot less often. You're trying to find players who shoot as often as possible. So I feel like playing an attacking midfielder on support would make the most sense. Playing a deep line playmaker and a roaming playmaker still does suit your tactic. The deep line playmaker will hold as much as possible. But if you ask me, maybe you're better off playing him in defensive midfield, so that way it can give you a bit more, protection. But you can still play with a 4-2-3-1 like that as well. A roaming playmaker dribbles a lot. We've also got the tactical instructions of tackle harder, mark tighter, force hole, because we do need someone in midfield who's actually going to win the ball back for us. Because having 3 playmakers is great creatively, but it's not when you've not got the ball. Well, I've just done clear, but you do want to keep. I think the roaming playmaker role suits the direct style of football because they dribble more and they roam and all that sort of business. Attacking midfielder on support, but you would want to give them some instructions like moving into channels. But more important, really, is just dribbling more and playing more risky passes is the more important one. In terms of your striker, your best bet is an advanced forward on attack. They dribble. They're probably the only one of the few strikers that actually dribble, which is what you're looking for. You're looking for dribblers, crossers, and shooters. And so advanced forward is probably your only option there, because I feel like deep line forward holds, target man holds, poacher, just very tactically disciplined. Complete forward does a bit too much. You can also go with a complete forward on attack if you ask me, but I just have a preference for advanced forwards in truth. But that's basically the shape of how your team would eventually work towards if that's something that you're interested in terms of playing a direct style of football. You can definitely go with a 4-4-2 if you wanted to, but I feel like playing a 3-man midfield is so important in modern football that playing a 4-4-2 would just probably expose your team quite often. But of course, it's all down to preferences, but this is just on the basis of your current formation. The other formation I was mentioning that you could do, I actually haven't set the tactical instructions or the role instructions, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what I was thinking you could play also, which is a 3-man back line, wing backs, defensive midfielder, central midfielders, and 2 strikers. I feel like that would really bring out the best out of your team, make the most out of you having 4 strikers. Of course, you didn't have too many wingers other than your first choice options, which were Carrasco and Griezmann, because you wanted to sell, for example, or it said he was already transfer listed in Gaetan. Correa could maybe be retrained to a central midfielder, that type of thing. So it's really up to you and how you want to take your team forward. But I feel like we've covered everything, so I think that'll be all for today's episode. If you did enjoy it, of course, please hit the like button and subscribe for more Daily Football Manager 2018 content. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always, guys, thank you all very, very much for watching.